Hi and welcome to my channel. I'm Lauren and thanks for joining me here for another video. Today I'm going to be creating an art journal spread using supplies that I found in a thrift store. So if you want to check out more in detail what these supplies are, it's in my previous video at the end. But this is going to be really exciting. I've chosen to do the topic of surrealism because basically all these different items I found in the thrift store are kind of all random. So I think when I figure out what I'm gonna make them all into, it's gonna be kind of very surrealist artwork. So if you don't know what surrealism is, it's basically an art movement where people like Salvador Dali, Max Ernst, Frida Kahlo, Leonora Carrington, and there was another one I wanted to say, but I can't remember who it was right now. But there's a lot of really interesting surrealism artists, and what they did is basically created artworks that sort of tap into the unconscious or the subconscious, sort of like the dream world. I kind of see this artwork almost as like venturing into the unknown. When I was a kid, I was like really interested in, the imagination and the unknown and things like the Yeti and just anything that was like strange and bizarre. I really was like very interested in, just finding out more about it. So this topic of surrealism is kind of all about that. It's just, it might look kind of weird, it might be kind of strange. But basically, like, that's kind of how our dreams are. Like, some of our dreams just don't really make sense, and yet we still have them. So there's something to dreams. It's all the layers kind of our brain, and there's a lot that goes on in there that we like don't really always fully tap into in this sort of awake world. So yeah. Let's start creating this art journal. I hope you enjoy it. It's going to be kind of a process of showing pretty much every step along the way, and yeah. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I'd love to have you join me here on this adventure, this journey of life and creativity, and yeah, I hope you're getting to enjoy the sunshine as well wherever you are in the world. So sending love and light, and let's do some art. So the first thing I wanted to do was kind of test out these watercolors using this sketchbook that I also found in the thrift store. The paper is kind of thick, so I thought maybe I'll just test out the colors and see how they work on this paper, because the paper is kind of like a handmade type of paper, it looks to be, at least. So I think I'll just paint the watercolors and test how bright the colors are, what the colors look like, how they seep into the paper, and see how that goes. So I decided I would kind of do a little bit of like a rainbow vibe, just sort of do the yellow and the orange and then this beige color, and just kind of see how things would go with these colors. Turns out, like, I really like how bright the colors on this watercolor tray are, and how they're showing up on the paper is really nice. This is quite a cool idea if you just have a free sketchbook page that you want to fill, but you're like not really sure what to do. Doing things like color swatches with art materials that you have could be like a nice way to create something, and you don't have to think too much about it. You could just kind of do it. So this is kind of how this was turning out, and I really actually like how it ended up looking. I don't know, color has always been something something that I've really loved all my life, so this page just makes me feel happy when I look at it. So my first impressions with these pencils were, oh no, they are probably going to be really awful. But I was like, I'm going to test them out and just start creating things. So I'm using one of these little stencils that came in this card making pack that I got at the thrift store. I'm going to outline this heart and use the pencils to color in the hearts. I wasn't really sure exactly what my plan was yet going forward, but I was like, I'm just going to test out all the supplies and kind of then I'm sure as I'm doing this, the idea for the actual art journal pages will kind of come together. So I drew these two hearts, and then for the first heart, I decided I would color the edges in, and actually I was kind of pleasantly surprised with the quality of the color. I really did not have high hopes for these pencils, but actually they're not too bad. Like, I would say that they're not any worse than or better than any other pencils I have. So I'm quite happy with how bright the colors are. And at the top of the paper, I was kind of just like testing if you could blend the colors into each other. For the second heart, I created almost like a patchwork kind of coloring. And yeah, that's how they turned out. Not too bad. So that's how I like to draw eyes. Obviously, there's lots of different ways, but maybe if you don't know how to draw an eye, then that short little tutorial could kind of give you an idea of where to start. I thought to draw an eye. I don't even know why. It's kind of just what popped into my mind. So I wanted to also use these colored pencils and test them out a little bit more extensively by trying to color in this eye with the pencils. And it was turning out pretty nicely, actually. I must say, my first impressions, as I've said already, they were not good for these pencils, but like, this is okay. This eye actually looks okay. I'm pretty happy with it. So yeah, this was my next addition to this Surrealism art journal page, was this eye. My next thought for the eye was to use the watercolors and the eye and the heart, and kind of use the watercolors to surround them and sort of add a little bit more color to these pictures, and kind of that mixed media vibe that I really like, and that is quite a common aspect of art journals. So this is kind of how I did it, was just like splattering bits of colors around the edges of the eye, and I did also the same with the hearts. For the next part of the art journal, I wanted to create some spaces to do some text because I had this stencil that I found in the thrift store with the letters, as well as this stencil. I really was drawn to this wavy shape. It kind of reminded me a bit of water. So I thought I would create a pattern that represented kind of flow and water using this stencil. When I'm creating art, I really like to not really be too much in my head. I don't really like think too much about what I'm going to create. I just kind of go with the flow, kind of let things happen as they want. So in this art journal, I also wanted to include this idea of how a river just kind of flows naturally, and as over time the river kind of carves these new paths and creates tributaries and sort of leads off in all different directions, and it sort of just goes with the flow. It keeps flowing as it is made to flow. So this is kind of like how I create art. Most of the time is just, and especially with this art journal page, is just kind of letting it flow how it is going to. The next thing that I wanted to create with was this envelope making stencil that was also part of this card making kit found in the thrift store. So I got these blue pieces of paper and a bunch of different kinds of paper from this set as well. So I decided to try to make this envelope and see how it would turn out. I think these envelopes can be kind of cool for art journals because you can like store little things inside. So at this point I wasn't really sure how I was going to include it, but I knew that it would somehow fit into the overall journal page. So yeah, this is how I made the envelope. Once I had finished making the envelope, I outlined the edges with a Posca marker, and then I found this dragonfly themed paper in this box as well, so I decided to use that to cover one of the edges to sort of break up the blues a little bit and add just another little section of color to this envelope. The dragonfly is a really interesting creature. If you ever get a chance to have a look at a dragonfly up close, you'll see that it is pretty weird looking. It's got these big bulging eyes and this very long, thin, delicate body and these beautiful wings that whenever the sun shines on them, the light kind of glistens and just is really beautiful creature, but also very strange looking. The dragonfly is said to be a symbol of transformation as well as hope. It can be a symbol and connection to the kind of magical, mystic world. Some people even say that when you look really up close at a dragonfly, that it almost looks like a fairy. I know maybe that sounds strange and maybe you don't believe in these things, but I kind of had that experience when there was one time I was having a walk by a river, and dragonflies really love, obviously, to be by water, and there was one dragonfly that just stopped there, and it was just really, really still. And I love photography, so I was able to take a photo of this dragonfly up close, and it was just like, it was kind of like looking at this little strange alien-like fairy type creature. It just is so weird to see it like up close like that. I just think when you think about it, there's a lot of animals, a lot of things on this world that are quite strange looking, but because we know them so well, we kind of like have made it make sense. You know, we've accepted that strangeness as being something normal and ordinary. So like, obviously that's how a dragonfly looks. So we've now, you know, you might not think a dragonfly looks strange. You might just be like, oh, it looks like a dragonfly. But when you really, really have a close look, it is kind of a very interestingly weird creature. So if you're still with me at this point in the video, thank you so much for being here. Obviously, it's a lot of short things that when you put it all together becomes a really long thing. So that's kind of what the process of making this art journal was. My next step in the process was I saw this Faber-Castell box, and I kind of wanted to use everything that I could, you know, like just... I saw this box and it had this little hole in it, and I was like, oh, okay, this looks like a door. So I'm gonna make it into a door. So I decided to include this box as well in my art journal. I think it can be quite fun in art journals to think how to use like unusual materials as well. So things like cardboard boxes and just random things you have laying around the house can be really useful in creating and adding some extra elements into your art journals. After I cut that up, I put it aside to figure out later, and I decided to make the letters. Since this watercolor paint was dry, I wrote with the stencil onto the spaces of color. While I was cutting up the letters one day at a time, I found that there was a scrap piece of paper that kind of reminded me of a bird in a way, with its wings. So I decided to trace around that, and got to the point where I had like half of it drawn, and then I was like, okay, I'll try to make it into a bird because it looks like a bird. But then when I thought about how to do the tail, it was like all over the place. So I was just like, I'm just gonna make this into kind of a different, weird looking type of creature, I guess, a bird creature of some kind. So yeah, it's gonna look a little bit surreal, a little bit unusual. So with surrealism, it's almost like these artists, they chose to walk into that unknown, to dive into that abyss, to dive into the unknowns of the mind, the subconscious, the unconscious. Look under the rocks, see what there is to see. So, and some of the things that come out are like pretty odd, pretty strange, pretty weird to the known mind, So yeah, when I look at like surrealism art, it's really interesting because it's like something you almost like never could imagine, but it's like it's possible to because they created these artworks, so these are things that that they saw somehow, Actually last night I was watching Star Wars, and it kind of had me thinking. I'm like, like in Star Wars there's all these really, really kind of weird looking creatures, and just generally the whole sci-fi genre of movies is kind of like that. And it kind of reminded me of surrealism because I was just thinking like, this came out of someone's head, this was imagined, this was seen somehow and put onto, taken from the mind and created into these like actual characters and visual 3D forms. So yeah, I don't know. Just it's weird the connections that come up in when you think about things. Okay, so now we're a little bit later. This part I actually did at night because I realized that I would have to glue everything and let it dry overnight. So I quickly finished the background. I stuck this paper on, and then I arranged everything, all these little parts that I had already made. I had this extra watercolor swatch that I thought would be really cool behind here. And that circle there, I actually cut out and I used it as a kind of looks like a planet. So I thought that'd be cool to have in this art journal spread, would be some planets and things like that. And then the doorway, I painted it with some green color. I think it was a gouache paint that I used, and arranged that. And then I thought the go with the flow and the water would be really cool coming out of this envelope. And I decided I would glue all of that down flat. And the eye and the hearts also found a space. So yeah, that's kind of the general arrangement of the art journal pages. The next day, or a little bit later on, I stuck some paper behind these doorway so I could add something in the doorway there, and I stuck this behind, as I showed you, and I used this little green piece of paper over there, and I thought that green would kind of match in nicely with the green on the other paper and a little bit of the yellow, so that the two sides would have some harmony in some way, because it's all these weird, strange, different parts, but I still wanted to bring some harmony into the piece. So I thought color was my main point of harmony. So in this art journal, I wanted to include a doorway because, first of all, the piece of cardboard, that's just kind of what it reminded me of straight away. But secondly, because doorways are quite a prominent feature in a lot of surrealism artworks. And the doorway is kind of like, I guess it could be seen almost like a sort of portal, I guess. When you're standing on one side of the door, you have a certain perspective, and then when you step through the door, you have a different perspective. I guess it could maybe be looked at like that. So I thought it was kind of interesting just why there's a lot of doorways in surrealism artworks, and kind of maybe just like that's how almost this like conscious and unconscious or subconscious, kind of the difference between is like how we look at it, perspective. Like in one way, on one side we, in our conscious real 3D world, we like know what's going on, we recognize images and we make associations and we apply meaning to things. And then if you go through that door to the other side, to the unconscious, to the subconscious, to the dream world, the big abyss where anything's possible, the imagination as such as well, where kind of it's a whole different way of looking at things, a whole different perspective. So yeah, that kind of is why I wanted to add a doorway to this, and maybe what doorways could mean. I mean, there's probably other meanings as well, but this is kind of what comes to my mind. Also, in this artwork, you'll notice a lot of planets. I wanted to add kind of these shapes and planets and things that relate to kind of like the universe and the galaxies, and because essentially, like a lot of our universe, if we go up into space, it's like what's close to us, we know. Like we know there's a planet called Venus, we know there's a planet Jupiter and Saturn and a bunch of other planets in the solar system. This is what we know because there's evidence to prove this. But beyond our solar system, there's so many other things we don't know yet. And so kind of that's the thought I was having with adding these sort of planet-like things to this artwork, was just how the solar system and the universe kind of also represents that like idea of what is known and what is unknown. So there's a lot of connections to all sorts of different things in this artwork, but ideally the main theme is just this kind of juxtaposition of things that we know and things that we don't know, and kind of how these things all kind of interplay around us all the time. So yeah, I hope this makes sense. It's kind of hard to describe in words. A lot of these things, maybe when you look at this artwork, you will get some of your own ideas, which is the great thing about art, is that it is so open to interpretation. So that's one beautiful thing about surrealism, is really anything is possible in this art genre. So one of the big things I've learned during this art journal process, and also just in life in general, is just keeping an open mind about things. I think it's really important. So if you're this far in the video, thank you for keeping that open mind, because obviously surrealism can get weird, and sometimes weird is a hard thing to process, but it's also kind of cool because it's different and it's not the same as everything else. So this is the last kind of parts of the video. I decided to create some paintings of dragonflies to add into some of the gaps, and also create more harmony with having certain parts of the art journal pages match other parts of the art journal pages. And I think you saw I also added some of the flowing water up and down the page, and all of this was using like scraps of paper left over from earlier in the process. So I really wanted to try and use as much of the things that I had as possible. And then this was kind of the fun part. I did a bit of a splatter. I remember doing this a lot when I was a kid, and it's kind of a fun, just freeing type of way to decorate some empty spaces, is just splatter bits of paint around on the page. So that's kind of what I did, just also to add some extra layers to the art journal. And then the last kind of part here was that I wanted to bring in a little bit more of the black, because there's so many colors and things going on. So I thought I would add a couple more planets to various parts of the art journal. So overall, these things that I found in the thrift store were actually pretty cool. The pencils, the stencils, the watercolors, and the art journal. And these were the other supplies I used. I used obviously some different types of glue. I've got some scissors. I did use some black markers and fine liner pens. I used some Posca markers as well. Posca markers are one of my favorite materials, so definitely suggest getting those if you are interested in them. And paintbrushes and a pencil. So those were the other supplies used in this art journal process. This was the final original rainbow painting that I did. The colors dried quite pastel, but I really love it. So I ended up just leaving this because I really liked it how it was. And then this is the final art journal, surrealism themed pages. I am pretty happy with how it turned out. It was quite a process. It got quite deep. Some of the conversations that I had during this video, obviously quite deep. But surrealism that's kind of what it's all about, is really just stepping a little bit into that deep unknown and seeing what comes out. So this is what came out. So that brings us to the end of the video. Thanks so much for joining me here. I hope you enjoyed the process, and I hope that you will kind of give surrealism a chance too if you are interested in just trying some sort of like weird and different and not really like knowing where you're going with it, but kind of just creating it as you go. Yeah, I hope you do experiment with some surrealism, and have a great day, and I'll see you again soon for another video.